You're listening to Building the Broncos with Nick Kendell and Carl Dumler, Broncos Country's leading draft and scouting analysts. Get on over to milehighhuddle.com to sound off on all things Broncos.
Hello there, Broncos Country, and it is once again time for another episode of Building the Broncos. I am your host, Carl Dumler, and of course today with me, as always, is Nick Kendell, and we are joined by the great Erick Trickel. As we get into all this draft content, of course, you got to have some Erick Trickel come on the show, so we're happy to have you, man. How you doing?
I'm doing good. It's definitely been a rough day, but it's gotten better.
Good. Well, I'm hoping this can make it end on a high note. As we get ready to talk, like I said, I mean, when you're talking draft, how can you not be happy?
Yeah, good point.
But Nick, how you doing, buddy?
Hey, doing pretty well. Excited to start my ski trip tomorrow, hang out with some friends, and have some adult beverages. And you know, it's gonna be a good weekend. Recording this on Thursday, you guys will be hearing this Saturday. Maybe as you're listening to it, I'm busting my behind on a mountain, so first time doing it. I figure I like being outside, and the winter absolutely just kind of kills me, so it's probably about time I learn how to ski.
Okay, well, just remember pizza, and what's the other one? I'm trying to remember how to stop.
French fries.
Oh, yeah, pizza and French fries.
Okay, just keep thinking about that as you're going down the mountain. It's amazing how many times you'll tell yourself that.
And I know if you lean on your left foot, you turn right, and if you lean on your right foot, you turn left. So it's a little counterintuitive there, but I'll get it. We're paying for lessons, so we'll get it down.
The controls are inverted.
Yes, exactly. Except you don't have to worry about up and down.
Yeah,
you hope
it's
not.
just going to be straight down. So,
well, good luck. Sometimes the hardest part is actually getting on the ride up the mountain. So
yeah,
good
that
luck
kind
with
of
that.
scares
I've
me.
fallen off that before. Off the lift.
Mm-hmm.
Oh my gosh. That's a little scary thing. And then they stop the whole thing and everybody's staring at you. It's it's a lot of fun. But anyway, back to football. Make sure you're following us on Twitter because, I mean, obviously, if you followed us for any amount of time, you see that we talk lots and lots of football on there. If you haven't followed us, you want to, if you like football at least. So you can find me at Carl Dumler MHH, Nick at Nick Kendell MHH, and of course, Erick at Erick Trickel. And you can also follow the podcast Twitter account at BTB Football Pod. And make sure you subscribe to our show wherever you listen to podcasts. Also, don't miss out on all of our great off-season content at milehighhuddle.com of the Maven Coalition and Sports Illustrated. Also know that our podcast is powered by Overtime Media.
This is the Overtime Podcast Network.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, today we get the great pleasure of presenting to you all three of our top 25 boards. And I will say, for the most part, we have pretty close to some of the same players. I mean, it's a little bit varied, but for the most part, I mean, when you're talking to the top 25 guys, usually you're pretty close on a lot of it. But the order is always going to be interesting in trying to figure out how we came up with the players that we did. And so I guess, Nick, you're the main guy for this. How do you want to go about kind of going through our list here?
well, I think we're starting. I talked with Erick earlier, and he wanted to do 25 to 1. So I think we'll start that way. And since Erick is the guest, he can give us his number one, and we can each give our. I guess we'll go just one by one. I mean, that's the way to do it. So, Erick, you're number 25.
Well, my number 25 guy is the offensive tackle out of USC and Austin Jackson. Basically, I think the first round is a little bit rich for him, but when you're talking about the Broncos specifically, and they want to find a developmental tackle, and I think that he's a perfect fit for that, especially if they want to have more movement from their linemen. He'll come in, he'll be a guy who can play left side or right side with Juwan James's injury history and the uncertainty about him continuing to play, as Mike Munchak basically gets to work with him and try and develop him. That's why I like him for the Broncos specifically, and he's a guy I'd be looking at that in that second round pick as that developmental tackle prospect.
Yeah, makes sense. I did hear, did he give some kind of bone marrow before the season?
Yeah, he donated bone marrow to his sister.
And so some were questioning whether that kind of limited his strength a little bit this past season, because there were times you saw that become an issue. And so that's a little bit of part of the developmental part of it, of just getting him a year in the weight room. It's amazing how much of a difference that can make. But I'll give my number 25 here then. DeAndre Swift of Georgia. And I know people are going to be sitting here going, oh my gosh, running back? Come on, people. One, this guy's more than a running back. He is an all-around weapon. He can help you in the pass game, the run game. He's that next kind of weapon that you're looking at in the NFL that's really developing. The running backs that are actually worth giving a second contract to are the guys that can actually help out in both areas. I know you're seeing a lot of running backs that teams are having a lot of buyer's remorse. Swift, I'm not taking him in the first round, but if he's there in the second round for the Broncos, it's got to be a conversation, I would say, just because of what this guy, just his explosiveness of what he could bring to the Broncos offense.
Yeah, and I saw a comp for him that I really liked in Dalvin Cook. You know, just a balanced runner, good vision. One thing with DeAndre Swift is I feel like he, you know, not the most explosive guy. He's not like Travis Etienne or Jonathan Taylor where you see that amazing giddy up, but just all around really good. And the biggest thing I think he brings some size, but he's also a pretty darn solid receiving back out of the backfield. So I like him a good amount, and he will make an appearance in my top 25 as well. Not taking him at 15. He's more of a, if he's there round 2, you know, absolutely love it. Maybe if you trade back from 15, you can look at that. But I would very much like to take him if he was there for the Broncos. He'd be a really good compliment to Lindsey.
With me, I was thinking about it with Swift there at 25 for me, but what came to it was that when I was scrolling through Twitter the other day and I saw a stat about his ability to create yards on his own, and it was just a little bit lower than you would want to see for a guy who, in my opinion, I'd be looking at the first 2 rounds. Like, don't get me wrong, I love his game, but it just screamed to me that he's just a little bit more offensive line dependent than just most other running backs. So I still like him. I'm still a big fan of him. And if he's there in the second round and none of these other guys that we have on here aren't available, I'm all for it. But I think I would probably prefer like Clyde Edwards-Helaire or J.K. Dobbins over him a little bit at this point.
Yeah, fair enough. And if you guys hear any banging in the background, Eric has some remodeling going on in his apartment. So we will do the best we can there. For me, next up is Patrick Queen. He's my number 25 player. Very athletic linebacker from LSU, flying around. Does not have the best tackling technique. Not always the best at deconstructing blocks, you know, and that's something that's important for a 3-4 defense specifically. But dude can fly around. Pretty good instincts, aggressive, and coverage upside. So I thought at the beginning of the season when I watched him, you could see the athleticism stood out, but just looked raw. The end of the season, especially the playoffs, flying around, really impressive. Also had a pretty good game against Alabama and Georgia, a couple games that stick out in my head. So I like Patrick Queen a fair amount. He's actually the only linebacker that makes my top 25, and a guy who just missed it, he's actually in my 26 to 30 range, is Kenneth Murray. I like Kenneth Murray. I think he's nasty. I just don't think he offers the coverage upside that I see in Patrick Queen. So I lean with Queen in that regard.
I lean with Queen.
Yeah.
All right. Well, 24. And I guess, Nick, let's just start with you. Let's kind of do a snake draft here, I guess you could say.
Yeah, it won't take up too much time here. DeAndre Swift, already talked about. I think he's a very good all-around back. Do want to see some of the 10-yard split and the agilities at the combine, but I think just the all-around game is really good. Maybe J.K. Dobbins is a guy that might supplant him, but he runs a little bit more upright, and I don't know if he's got the receiving all-around game that I see with DeAndre Swift. Again, Dalvin Cook is a name I keep coming back to. I think Shermer was with the Vikings when they took Cook in the second round. Cook was probably a first round talented back, had a bad combine, and then also had some questionable off the field stuff, but good back. And Eric's talking about the offensive line stuff. Well, the Georgia team did have one of the better offensive lines in football, and they have that ground and pound style. And well, again, with DeAndre Swift, he just doesn't have that many carries on him. Not typical for many running backs this high that you see coming out. So I think he's got a lot of tread left on his tires. You're going to get a good first 4 or 5 years out of his contract.
All right. Well, then I went to the cornerback position, and I'm the only one that has this guy, so it makes me a little nervous. But I have C.J. Henderson, and I'll just give you a little clue here. He's my 5th cornerback, so I have 5 cornerbacks here in my top 25. And I like him. He's long. He's got, long arms that can make up for a lot of issues. There are times where he gets himself out of position. He's still pretty raw sometimes in how he goes about his coverage, but because of his athleticism, I just see there's a ton of upside with this guy. There are some questions with just his his consistency in helping in the run game, which I know is a huge deal for secondary players with Vic Fangio. But I just really like his upside, and I just think that he could be a really good fit for the Broncos. And like I said, he's my 5th cornerback, but I still really like him, especially if he's there in that 2nd round. I think he'd be a really good pick for the Broncos.
Well, I can't speak for Nick, but the sole reason why I left him off basically is his issues against the run game and how Vic Fangio values that. So I have a hard time seeing him being way up there for the Broncos. His play in coverage, though, is great. I absolutely love his coverage play.
Yeah, I think he's probably 2nd in this draft as far as coverage goes. And it's not just the run game, it's the short pass game as well. His tackling leaves a lot to be desired, but as far as a package of length and athleticism and looseness, click and close, all that, he's really good. I just think that a team non-Broncos related will value him higher than the Broncos, which really prioritizes tackling from all 11 players, which, I mean, it's necessary in this specific scheme. So like him in a vacuum, just not so much for the Broncos.
Yeah, well, my 24th overall player is Grant Delpit, and it's kind of the same reason as CJ Henderson, just those concerns about the tackling. But with Delpit for me is he's just so smart and instinctive in coverage and against the run, and just can bring a lot to a defense that I'm willing to overlook a little bit of those tackling issues, I suppose, with him, unlike with Henderson. But it's also comes down to the fact that the Broncos are expected to tag Justin Simmons, and they might be bringing Will Parks back. I'm not really seeing the need for a safety, so that's another reason why I was a little bit lower on Grant Delpit. But he's another player that, outside of the tackling, I love his play, but just the tackling issues and the whole needing a safety thing just has me a little bit lower on him for the Broncos.
Yeah, he didn't even make my top 25. But it really does kind of boil down to this last year. Just he has so much bad tape, not only as a run defender, but there are times in coverage where he gets himself it's almost like he's too overconfident in himself. And he takes risks, which there's nothing wrong with completely taking risks, but when you're the single high safety, the last line of defense, there are times where he gets beat in that sense. I just saw a play today where he did a 360 spin because he just was so out of position on making a play on the wide receiver. And I still think he's a great
Jerry
player.
Jeudy.
Well, okay, but but still, I like him. I don't think. I mean, you could say C.J. Henderson isn't a great fit for the Broncos. It's the same thing here with Grant Delpit. I don't think he's a great fit, especially if they're bringing back Justin Simmons.
Yeah, I think that maybe with Justin Simmons and the versatility the Broncos have at the safety, it's not such a dichotomized safety position in this scheme. So with Delpit, I do have him in my top 25. We'll get a chance to talk about him, but he brings a deep coverage / cover one ability that I don't see any other safety in this class having, at least to the level that Delpit does. Maybe Ashton Davis, but it's the Malik Hooker syndrome. You know, how much do you value the ability to play coverage and that cover one and what it can do for you playing numbers up in the box? So I understand why you wouldn't have him there, and I think that he's probably going to be drafted bottom half of the first round, definitely not a top 10 pick. But he does offer some skill. It's just when the people were mocking him to the Broncos, when the Broncos were picking top 10, heck, even at 15, that doesn't make sense. But if they trade down to, say, 25 to 30 and he's the pick, I would understand it.
All right, well, let's go to pick 23 here. And Eric, you are up again.
Well, for me, I'm going to the cornerback position, and this is one that I was a little bit lower on just probably about a little bit over a month ago, but I went back and watched the rest of the season he had. I only watched about the first half or so, and that's AJ Terrell out of Clemson. Again, I like his tape, and I liked his tape beforehand, but I just saw a lot of issues and inconsistencies pop up on tape. But when I went back and watched towards the end of the season of what he was able to do, become more consistent, and just seeing these traits that stuck out a little bit more that I had as negatives and just getting answered a little bit, definitely moved him up quite a bit. I don't want to say I'm super high on him. He's not a guy that I would take in the first round, and I can see him going in the first round. But definitely second round, if Denver's still needing a corner, if they don't take one at 15 or something, then he's definitely one I'd be looking at. I like his fit with the scheme. I like that he's tough, and he's willing to be physical.
Well, and I think that's something we should talk about here just real quick. To understand, just because they're top 25 on our board doesn't mean we'd be willing to take them in the top 25.
Yeah, this is a non-quarterback board.
Right. And a lot of times, just because there's 32 picks in the first round doesn't mean you have 32 first-round grades.
Quite on the contrary.
Yeah, usually it's closer to like 15 to 20. Best drafts you have around 25. And teams vary and people vary as well, but for the most part, like I said, we'll have to talk about this of maybe where is our cutoff point of guys that we'd be willing to take in the first round compared to guys that we're wanting to take in the second round. And I think we're still at that point of every one of the players we've listed are second round kind of players so far.
Second round grade. Yeah.
Right.
So, Carl, we actually have the same guy for our 23.
We do. Justin Jefferson. And it's one of those, when I'm looking at the wide receiver position, I like him. I don't love him. He's
about as safe as it gets.
He is. And that's the thing is he does everything pretty well. There's no real trait that sticks out and says, bam, this is the guy. He's not the greatest in the short area quickness, but he has decent speed. He's got decent movement skills. He's got really good hands. I guess that I would say that's maybe his one really consistent part of his game is he just never seems to drop anything. He's got very good body control. There's, like I said, there's a lot to like about his game. There's just some of these other guys that we're going to list, they have elite traits that really put them over the edge that you can sit there and say, this is why they're going to be possibly a top 10 receiver in the NFL. Where Justin Jefferson, I think he's a really good number 2.
Yeah.
I just don't ever see him developing into a true number 1 in the NFL.
He really kind of reminds me of Keenan Allen coming out. You know, Keenan Allen, I think he was injured and fell to the third round, but he ended up being one of the better receivers in that class. I'm surprised how well he can release. You know, he's not the burstiest guy, but he kind of does this thing where it's almost like stride difference, like stride length, where he can totally fool a corner and then like Houdini himself 6 yards of separation. So he played a lot of slot out of LSU. I think he can play a good amount of Z as well. And I really like him. I think he'd be a really good fit in this scheme. Again, how much upside are you getting from him? Because he doesn't really have that Trump trait that, you know, I think it's Matt Harmon talks a lot about with wide receivers, especially in the NFL. They need to have that one trait that they can hang their hat on. I don't really see that with Jefferson, which could cause him to slip, but he just wins. And he wasn't the best wide receiver also at LSU, so we don't know how much it is as far as, you know, rolling coverage over to him, because Jamar Chase probably was the best wide receiver in football this past season. I don't think there's any probably.
He did. I mean, there's questions of whether he just had one of the best wide receiver years ever in college football.
I just don't want to be that guy where it's like, well, this year is good, but wait till next year. You know, I've been victim to that before. So Jamar Chase he won the Blitnikoff Award for a reason.
Right.
But Justin Jefferson was a number 2. I think he can play Z or slot really well in this scheme, and I like him a lot. A guy with a little bit more upside, though, for my number 22 player, sticking to the wide receivers, Brandon Ayuk, the junior college player, played for Arizona State this past season, kind of in the shadow of N'Keal Harry last year, really stepped up this year, has a 6'9" wingspan, which is absolutely bonkers for a 6'1" receiver. There was an injury that kept him out of the Senior Bowl, which is unfortunate. We'll have to track that with the combine. And I don't love his ability to get off of press, physical coverage, as well as I see a false step out of his stance many of times, but as far as the ability to track the ball along, like I talked about, 6'9", this dude looks like Slender Man out there grabbing the ball. And the yak ability, I think the upside is tremendous for Brandon Ayuk. And he could end up, I'd be 0% surprised if he ended up being the best wide receiver in this class. Just a little bit more bust potential, because if you struggle with press, that's a huge detriment for many of those early round wide receiver busts over the past few seasons. But I like him a lot.
All right. Yeah. I think he's going to appear in all 3 of ours here pretty soon. But
I'm the lowest on him.
Yeah, you are. But no, I have Patrick Queen as my next one. I mean, Nick, you've already talked about him a little bit. Just incredible ability, especially in coverage. That guy that could be a true 3-down linebacker. He has really shot up boards. I know NFL teams probably had him already up there, but the media is really starting to catch up with what this guy brings to the table. And you just see a lot of flash plays with him. Now, he's not a finished product by any means, and tackling is a concern at times. Ability to get off of blocks is a concern at times. So, there's still a lot of room to grow. But when you think about a player that you could see really developing into a top 10 linebacker in football, this is that kind of guy. And so I really like his game. It's just one of those, again, if the Broncos trade back and can get him, I'm going to be pretty happy. If they take him at 15, I'm probably going to be a little upset.
I like Queen. I don't have him in my top 25. My issue with him is just that he's just, I don't want to say he's raw, but there's just a lot of work with him that needs to be done, especially with him against the run. Super athletic. I like his play in coverage, and he was another one who just missed my top 25. I have another linebacker in it, though. But I still really like him, and it's just one of those players like Swift and Henderson that I like certain aspects to their game, but I just have a little bit too many questions for them that are too big for me to put them in my top 25.
Yeah, absolutely. I get that. I mean, that's the thing. Yeah, with the top 10, you can kind of vary that, but once you get down to like 20 to 40, that's going to be different for everybody. That's going to be very different for every team. So that's not unexpected.
All right. Well, Eric, who do you have yet 2020 at 22? Here we go. Not 2020.
Well, my next player is another corner, and it's a corner that I've actually been high on for quite a while. And Nick, of course, is stealing for anytime he's talking about cornerback prospect. But that's Jeff Gladney out of TCU. Super athletic guy. Absolutely love him for the scheme that the Broncos run. Not the most physical guy at the catch point, but he just has tremendous ball skills. I'm a really big fan of his. He's a guy that I wouldn't be considering at 15, but if Denver traded down, probably into that around 25, this is a guy that I'd be looking at. I think that he definitely has that first round corner to him, and just again, he's just another corner that I just love. I love the ball skills that he brings.
Yeah, I'm a big fan as well. Those TCU guys, man, that TCU strength and conditioning coach needs to get a raise because they have some athletic freaks there. I wouldn't be shocked if Gladney ends up the second cornerback off the board after the combine. But anyway, we should probably keep moving it along. But next one, 21 for you, Eric.
21 for me is an offensive tackle that, again, maybe not so much at 15, but moving down out of Georgia, Isaiah Wilson. He's a guy that another developmental guy for the Broncos because there is quite a bit that he needs to work on. I love the power he brings. I want to see his movement ability at the combine before I really settle into him as a real first-round guy for the Broncos. But I love the power. Again, I love the power he brings. I think that there is some potential with his athleticism for the Broncos to work with, and he's just like Austin Jackson, my 25th prospect. Just a bit of that developmental tackle that the Broncos can get to sit behind Bowles and James, step in at right tackle, and let Mike Munchak work with and develop.
All righty, another tackle for you, Carl.
Yeah, I went Mekhi Becton, and I mean, this is the mountain, I guess is what he should be called. What, 360, 370 pounds?
6'8", yeah.
Yeah, if the Broncos had kept Scangarello, he would not be in my top 25. But because they made the change and there could be a lot more power gap kind of blocking, I mean, I know they're going to vary, but he is athletic, especially for his size. I know that's what keeps being said, and that's kind of the throw-in that has to happen every single time. But he is still athletic no matter what size he is, and he's got power. He is only a tackle. That's why he's lower on my board compared to some of the other tackles. Just because of his size, I don't think he'd be able to handle the inside as much. And I do worry about some conditioning issues. I do worry about some injury issues. I mean, there's not many people that can be 360, 370 pounds and take the beating that comes with the NFL and stay healthy. And so I do worry about, can he play past the first contract? But when you're talking about a guy that can really just destroy people in the run game, has that ability where teams just can't get around him in the pass game, he doesn't have to take a whole lot of steps. He's just so long and big. It takes so much just to get around him. But I like him a lot. I just, there's a lot of worries for him. And so this is still my cutoff of viewing him as really late round 1, early round 2. If the Broncos trade back, maybe this is a guy you take a chance on, but I do like his game.
Yeah, for me, 21, Grant Delpit, safety from LSU, had a much better sophomore year than a junior year. Did have an injury this past season that could have limited him. Don't love his tackling ability. I feel like he leaves his feet too many times, but he's probably the best safety that can play that single high in this class, and that's a super valuable skill set. It's not something that Fangio has demanded from his safeties. He's liked a little bit more too deep and a guy that can come down and play nickel, but I think Grant Delpit still's got a high ceiling, especially the ability to take the ball away. So want to see him test, want to see if he's healthy, whatnot. But I feel like 21 in a board that's not elevating edge rushers for myself and especially quarterbacks, that seems about fine for Grant Delpit. Not taking him at 15, but trade down candidate for sure. And number 20 for me, another SEC defensive back. Excuse me, Trevon Diggs, cornerback from Alabama. I am not sure about. I go back and forth on him as far as the exact scheme fit for the Broncos here. He's long, he's decently athletic, and he has good ball skills. He has the ability to be physical. I'm not sure if he'd be better in a more cover 3 scheme, and especially one that lets him play more on the line and press. It depends on what Fangio is going to ask him to do, and I do believe that Fangio will put a cornerback in their best spot. But is he a guy that has the hips and fluidity to play that off coverage, the click and close? I'm not sure there, but I think the upside is fairly good. And he's probably a guy who you're not going to have the best year 1, but year 2, 3, and 4 potential could be very high. So I like Trevon Diggs a good amount, and he comes in 20 for me.
Yeah. I will say when he had Prince Amukamara, he let him play a lot of press coverage.
Yes.
And so he does play to the strengths of his players. I mean, he would have him drop into zone or play man. I mean, just kind of whatever they were calling, but he did allow him to play press coverage.
I just want to add that I find it funny, Nick, that you and I have basically flip-flopped on Trevon Diggs. Because I remember just a few weeks ago, you and I were talking about him and how you really liked his fit and you thought that he could be pretty fluid in coverage for the Broncos and all this stuff like that. And I was hesitant about it. I went back and watched him a little bit more. And I came away with it. All right, yeah, maybe he can be a little bit more effective in the Broncos coverage, playing off coverage, and with the fluidity that he does have and everything. And now you're turning around and saying that you're not so sure about it. I just find that funny. Just got to throw that out there.
It's silly season. I mean, you got him coming up here. I got him at 20. So after cornerbacks to Jeffrey Okudah, I could put 8 names in a hat and pull one out, and I'd be like, yep, that makes sense for cornerback too. So that's where it is right now.
And I'm going to list another one here then, Christian Fulton of LSU. Yep. Now we're talking about fit. I don't love his fit for the Broncos, but I still think the talent is there, and he was playing a little bit hurt this year. We've heard there's some concerns about a shoulder injury, so we'll kind of see what happens at the combine. But, I mean, athletic, the guy is pretty good. Man coverage, the guy is really good. He does do a lot of press coverage there at LSU. It's what they ask him to do. And it's just kind of crazy. Last year he played like their number 1 cornerback, even though he wasn't listed that way. This year he's listed as like the number 1 cornerback, but he wasn't their best cornerback. And so it just kind of flip-flopped. I mean, LSU they produce corners and safeties like crazy. It's just, I don't know how they do it every year. But he's the next one in the line, and a player that, I mean, if the Broncos took him, I would understand. Again, he's another one that was some tackling concerns, and maybe that shoulder just played into that where, hey, if your shoulder's hurting, you don't want to get hit in that spot. And so I can understand that a little bit, but I like the player. I don't love him. Yeah.
And our next, we should probably keep it moving along. We're already at almost 30 minutes, only through 5 guys. Yeah. Yes. So, Eric, number 20 for you.
All right. My number 20th is Kenneth Murray, and I just like his play. I think that he's a guy that, I mean, could he be a little bit better in coverage? Sure. But he's a guy that he's just going to go find the ball, and he's going to go hit the guy. Like, it's just that simple with him. I just love his play. He's probably my top pure linebacker in the class, and I just love his play. I mean, just that attitude of, there's the ball, I'm going to go hit the guy who has it. Just absolutely love that.
Is he banging on your door in the background? Is that him trying to get in there?
No, that would be them hammering up stuff on the walls. And basically, so right below my office is basically the main room they're remodeling. So that's just such a joy.
I can imagine. I mean, he's a glass eater. I like Kenneth Murray a fair amount. Have heard some questions about his overall intelligence. That'll be fleshed out a little bit more, I'm sure, at the Combine. But, I mean, I heard somebody describe him as a glass eater, and I can see it. I really think that at pick 19, he makes a load of sense for the Raiders. But speaking of 19, now we're on our 19th overall player on the board. Eric, floor is yours. And I guess you guys, Eric and Carl, you guys are bros here. Same player at 19.
Well, before I get that, there is one player that I just want to mention just real quick because I don't have him on my board. And it wasn't intentional. I actually kind of just don't know how, just miss it. And that's Christian Fulton. So I guess I would. This is probably right around where I would actually insert him and just move everybody else down.
Okay.
I had no idea how I missed him on my board. It just was something I was doing at work and just somehow just missed it. But the guy that I actually have on my list is Brandon Ayuk out of Arizona State. I mean, basically everything that Nick said about him when he was talking about him just a few minutes ago is just basically similarly to how I feel about him. Like
6'9".
Yeah, that wingspan. I like the speed and athleticism he brings to the table. I do have some questions about his route running and just how good it is overall. I mean, there are a few routes that he can run pretty well, but it's just not very consistent throughout every route that he's going to be asked to run at the NFL level.
Doesn't that Arizona State quarterback look exactly like Josh Rosen? Is that just me? I mean, he looks exactly like Josh Rosen.
Yes.
Not like I think he's African American, but like the slender, that helmet, and his beautiful throwing mechanics. I mean, I thought it was Josh Rosen when I was watching it. So anyway, Carl, Brandon Ayuk.
Well, I'm not really going to add too much to it than what you guys have already said. So I'll just let it pass on to you so we can keep on time here so we're not having everybody listen to a 4-hour podcast.
All right, number 19 for me, Jeff Gladney, really good TCU cornerback. I think he's one of the ones that could fit in a multitude of schemes, but I really like him in this one. I think I'm going to compare him to Jair Alexander because he's got that he's not the biggest, but he plays like a big guy, and he's just angry, and he's a chirper, and I just love the attitude, and he's going to test out the gym. I think he was one of Bruce Feldman's the freak athletes going into this season. So he pulled out of the combine, or not the combine, the Senior Bowl. I'm not sure if that was injury related, but we'll get to see him at the combine. And again, Eric, I said this on the live stream on Tuesday. Gladney's a guy that I don't love at 15, but as a trade back candidate, sign me the heck up. He's going to go to some playoff team and be their second or third corner, and they're going to absolutely love him that they have him. So I like Jeff Gladney a lot. Go ahead.
If he ends up with the Chiefs, I may actually cry.
Oh my gosh! Don't speak that into existence.
I may actually cry.
Yeah, that's one I don't like. For me, number 18. Now we're going to go around. First time this guy showed up on the board, Josh Jones, offensive tackle from Houston. I like Josh Jones a fair amount. I've actually heard some murmurs that he could go as high as 10. He's a perfect zone offensive tackle, really good mover, might need a redshirt season, just work on some technique. I think he had 4 different offensive line coaches while playing at Houston, but really smooth mover, really good in his pass sets, can kick out to that second level or move laterally really well. And again, I think he's probably more zone specific. I don't know if he's got the body type or the sand in his pants, so to speak. He doesn't got that donk where I can see him moving to guard year one, maybe, but I don't think so. But I do think he has tremendous upside, especially in a more pass heavy scheme or a zone scheme. And I like him a lot. So 19, Josh Jones. All
right. Well, I have Trayvon Diggs, and it is funny.
Yeah,
you got me onto you got me onto this guy, and then Eric was kind of against it, going, "Nah, I don't think so." So I was kind of going back and forth a little bit, and so now both of us have him higher than you when you were the one that kept pounding the table for this guy. So it is kind of funny, but no, I like him. I think he's an athletic freak for his size. When you're looking at a cornerback that is 6'2". And I mean, he played wide receiver, so you don't have to worry as much about whether he can catch the ball or not. I mean, he's not the best at it, but he can definitely do that. He plays pretty well in zone coverage because you see a lot of that there with Alabama. They like to do that. He's got that length that you like to be able to challenge guys. Again, he's got that athleticism to keep up with guys down the field. And a lot of the plays that I saw him actually get beat were plays where he was actually still in great coverage. It just was a great throw. And so I do think some of his stats against him are just because he played some great quarterbacks this last year and guys that just made some outstanding plays.
Yeah, so 18 for you, Eric.
Well, for 18, this is a guy that I'm actually looking at all the boards. I am the lowest one on, and that's Andrew Thomas, the other tackle from Georgia. And this is a guy that at 15, here you go, guys, hot take, I'm not sold. And the biggest reason is when I watch his tape, I see so many balance issues. I see a guy that I once considered a franchise left tackle that I now sit there and think, all right, this is a guy that's going to be a guard in the NFL. I think that is going to be his best position. I think that he could be a solid tackle in the NFL, but he's got to fix the balance issues first and foremost, no matter where he lines up at. And for the Broncos, if you trade down to the early 20s, then yeah, I'd be fine with this because this is a guy that I think you can plug in at right guard and have somebody to be starting for you and develop to be a tackle, kick out to right tackle if James goes down, so on and so forth. So that's where I stand with him. And I know I'm a little bit lower on him than everybody else, but those balance issues are really severe.
I also don't think he has great foot speed. I feel like he has to try to cheat against speed rushers, and that leaves him very vulnerable to counters. And I don't know if he has it.
And
I don't know if he has that juice.
And that's something you can't really coach up a whole lot. You either got it or you don't. I mean, you either have athletic feet or you don't. You can improve some, but it won't dramatically improve.
All right, so now 17, Eric.
Well, you guys have talked about him pretty extensively, and there's not much really more for me to add. And I have Trevon Diggs here, which, again, I just find it funny that I used to be the lowest one on him, and now I'm the highest. That's pretty much all I want to add. Is just I love this time of year just for that reason. It's just how often, especially just amongst us three, and well, not just amongst us three, but everyone, is the conversations we have and just how seeing people's opinions change after they go back and watch them because they hear somebody else's opinion. I absolutely love that time of year. That's why I love the draft. And that's why I just love talking the draft with you guys, especially, is because you guys make me question some of my own evaluations at times and make me go back and watch. And either I come back, all right, yeah, this is really what I think, or I'm like, I can get to see what you're talking about. So, but yeah, it's Trevon Diggs. So,
number 17 for you, Carl?
Jeff Gladney. He's my number 2 cornerback, and I absolutely love his game. He's that guy that looks like he's playing with like that little man syndrome of like, I have to go out there and prove I'm better than you. And I love that kind of fight in my cornerbacks. And then on top of that, the fact that the guy is an athletic freak that is one of the few cornerbacks that I think could actually halfway keep up with the Tyreek Hill in one-on-one coverage. Now, I mean, he's still going to get beat if he has to do that an entire game. But I think if you ask him to do it on a few plays, I think this is one of the few cornerbacks that you can sit there and say, yep, that guy can handle that position at times. So I love his game. I just think he, just like Eric said, at 15, it's maybe a little bit of a reach. If the Broncos trade back, he should absolutely be the consideration.
Yeah, I like that a lot. My number 17, my number 2 cornerback, Christian Fulton. Gonna wait and hear on that shoulder from the combine, but I love the overall package. I think he's plenty long. I do think the tackling is a concern, but it's not Greedy Williams, CJ Henderson level of concern for me, at least. I think that LSU asked him to do a lot this year. They asked him to press a lot, and he's got really good hips, good click and close, and just an overall really good cornerback. It does remind me a little bit of Roby because sometimes it's not all there as far as a technical aspect, but I think the traits have at least a very high-end cornerback, too, with a potentially number 1 cornerback. I think he can do zone or man, off or press as well. So I like Fulton a fair amount. Those medicals for the combine will be interesting. And then a guy that I can't believe I am the lowest on for my 16th player because I've been hyping him up for, a full 365 days now. Jalen Reagor, wide receiver from TCU. Jitterbug speed. I think he brings multidimensional speed. All these teams looking to decompress defenses, not only vertically but horizontally. Jalen Reagor from TCU could do that. He's also jacked. I mean, he's 5'11". Oh, he's small. No, he's not. He's going to weigh 190 to 200 pounds, and he's going to run a 4.35 40. So I love Jalen Reagor. I do want to see him in the drills, show the ability to track the football, bring it in cleanly. He did have some concentration drops, some Will Fullerism, if you will, but I really like Jalen Reagor, and I would not be at all shocked, surprised, upset if the Broncos took him at 15 at this point. I think his stock is only going to go higher and higher as the closer we get to April.
All right. Well, I have my top safety, and it's Xavier McKinney. And love his game. Nick, I think, is the guy that really got me onto him. And, in our last show, we talked about this, of guys that could be a surprise pick for the Broncos there at 15. And this could even be with signing Justin Simmons, just because we talked about it, where the Broncos play so much 3 safety looks anyway. And his ability to step in there in the nickel if the Broncos need him there, his ability just to play pretty much every safety position, whatever you need, he can do it. He can play zone. He can play man. He's solid as a tackler. He just has it all. And, there's not a huge weakness to his game that I see. And for the Broncos, I think he would step in and be kind of like that third whatever secondary player you need to come in for nickel, he's the first guy coming in.
All right, Eric, 2 to 4 sentences. Number 16.
For me, it's Clavon Chasen out of LSU, the edge rusher. And basically the simple reason is I'm not looking at him at 15, but moving down a few spots, and depending on how the board falls, I'd be considering him just simple fact of Von Miller's age, Bradley Chubb coming back from an injury. I'm not overly sold on the depth. Malik Reed wasn't as great as everybody says he was this last year. Justin Hollins being just not the best edge and not sure if he's going to make it out at off ball. I just have concerns about edge. And so moving down that from 15 a few spots, I'd be looking at Chasen there.
Yep. So now you're number 5. Oh, actually, we should take a break first. Folks, don't go anywhere. We still have 15 more players to get to. We'll make sure to kick it into hyper gear here because we are running long. Of course, what's new? We're talking prospects. It's fun, but we got to take a break. We will be right back.
This is the Overtime Podcast Network.
Alrighty, and we are back on the Building the Broncos podcast. I am Nick Kendell along with Carl Dumler and joined today by Erick Trickel. Eric is up now with his 15th overall player on his Denver Broncos Pacific Big Board. Eric, take the floor.
All right, everyone, grab your pitchforks and your torches and come hunt me down. But at 15, I have Henry Ruggs, and he's another one that I'm not sold on at 15. It's that simple. Like, yes, he brings speed, but he doesn't offer much more than that to me. And this is a guy that I have gone back not once, not twice, but like 3 or 4 times just because of all the differing opinions that I've seen on him. I'm not sold on him. Like, I love the speed, don't get me wrong, but just the route running, there's no speed variation to his routes. The physicality through the routes, I'm not seeing it. I think he's a very physical blocker, so it doesn't add up as to why it's not there through his routes. And I think that he's got good hands, he's solid with contested catches, but at 15, I just want a receiver who's offering me just a little bit more right away. And could Ruggs offer that down the road? Sure, but I want it now. If I'm taking a receiver at 15, I want that versatility to the offense now, not a year or 2 from now.
Well, maybe you should go read this article that somebody wrote called "Analytics Reveal Why Broncos Fans Should Beware of Alabama Wide Receiver Henry Ruggs." I think you might agree with that article a little bit.
You know, I actually didn't want to bring up the whole dominator rating and breakout age and all that stuff like that, just because analytics can be such a controversial thing. But because a lot of people think that, and I've dealt with this just from that article that I wrote, of people saying, oh, you hate Ruggs, you don't want the Broncos to draft him, you're saying he's going to be a bust. That's not what that's saying. It's offering up more information, just another piece of the puzzle. That's how I put it in the article. It's another piece of the puzzle to use in just your whole evaluation of prospects. I saw on Twitter today, and I think actually Nick retweeted it, of a list of Broncos who had high dominator ratings that busted in the NFL. There's outliers for both.
Right.
But just definitely go read that article. You'd understand what we're talking about here a little bit more. But that is one reason, too, that I'm a little bit lower on him. But I just didn't want to bring it up.
Yeah, no, I understand. And that is a great point, that a lot of this falls in gray areas. Not everything's black and white. Just because, hey, they really stink at this, that doesn't mean they're going to be a bust, or this shows up as a red flag. Doesn't mean they're going to bust. It just means this is something to be concerned about. But, all right, well, I'll go to my wide receiver then. And I have Jalen Reagor. And absolutely love his game. I mean, we've already talked about him. I guess both of you guys have already talked about him, right? Or just me. Oh, okay, just me. No. Or no, I guess Nick has. Yeah, Nick has talked about him. But I mean, and this is where some of the argument comes into of Ruggs or Reagor. I think this is a real argument that should be happening because Reagor does offer a little bit more fluidity. I think he maybe offers a little bit year one more than what Ruggs can bring into, as Eric has kind of hinted at. And he does have some questionable hands, but beyond that, just his game is so electric. And what he can help in special teams. He can help short, intermediate, deep, whatever you need the guy to do, he can do on the field.
Alrighty, number 15 for me, I have Mekhi Becton, tackle from Louisville, super high upside, 6'7", 360 pounds. Carl talked about him a bit. I know that Daniel Jeremiah was waxing poetic about him today, just going on and on, just, writing love stories about him. He's a guy who there's definitely a very low floor, but probably the highest ceiling of any of the tackles in this class because of the size and the movement skills. I do have some questions about the conditioning, especially when it pertains to playing at altitude. But at 15 here, I don't have a problem with it. I'm swinging for the fences on a player like this. And again, with more power coming in here, more inside zone, I think he fits. I don't think he can play guard year one, but again, the tackle upside, the economy of trying to find a good tackle, I just think he's too good here to pass up. So I have him here at 15, knowing full well that it's definitely a riskier pick. Probably the least risky of a lot of these guys coming up here for me. My number 14 player, Erick's number 14 player as well, Xavier McKinney. I like him a lot. I do think he has some single high ability. It's not the Grant Delpit level, but he's just really solid across the board. He can play that nickel really well. He can play the two high safety, and he's got great feel for the short area zones, passing off zones, and is pretty darn good in the open field and tackling. So I really like Xavier McKinney a lot. I'd have zero issue taking him at 15 because he's going to be a really good player for a long time. I really like his game.
All right, well, I'm going to be the one person that doesn't have him here, and I have Josh Jones. And Nick's already talked about him a little bit of his ability to play in zone, but also just his pass blocking. The fact that he is so raw and yet still wins like 99% of the time as a pass blocker is just impressive. I mean, you get this guy any kind of coaching, and he could become one of the most impressive left tackles in football just because he has great feet, or quick feet at least. He's still got to work on his feet some. He always seems to get his body in position, and he's just got to know what to do once he gets there is the main thing. But again, if you get this guy some coaching, you give him a year with Munchak, watch out what this guy can do at the left tackle spot.
And for me, as Nick said, is I have Xavier McKinney here too. And basically everything that Nick and Carl have said, I agree with. I mean, he's just a versatile piece. And he's a Mika Fitzpatrick type piece for a defense that you can just use in a variety of ways. And I actually like his ability to, or at least the tools that I've seen, to be able to plug him outside every now and then on the boundary, depending on the down, the distance, the situation, the receiver, all that information, all that variables. I actually like his play overall. And he's a guy, this is right where I'd be looking at, all right, at 15, I'm perfectly fine with this pick. This is right about that point for me. I like him. I like what he brings to the table. Versatile piece for the defense. And then next up for
number 13.
And then next up for me is Jalen Reagor out of TCU. I mean, you guys have spoken about him already. I think that he offers up a lot more to the offense than Henry Ruggs does at this time. Right away, I think that he has, surprisingly enough, I actually think he has a little bit more upside than Henry Ruggs does. I think he's got plenty of speed. He's got good quickness. I like his routes. I do want to see how his hands are during the gauntlet because he has a lot of concentration drops, and that's going to be the biggest test for that. How much can you focus, get those catches while you're moving downfield? That's going to be the big test for me, and that might change my opinion on him a little bit. But for right now, yeah, I'm definitely looking at him at 15. I think if Denver wants him, that's where they'd have to get him.
All right,
I don't see him getting past 21. I think when it comes down to it, the Philly is very obviously looking for a wide receiver and one with the speed, and he could end up being the best of them. So it'll be interesting.
All right, well, Nick and I both have the same guy here, Andrew Thomas. And I'm with Eric. There are some questions to his game, some limitations. He probably has the lowest ceiling of any of the top tackles in this draft, but he also has a pretty high floor. I mean, he's been a very consistent blocker for the most part there at Georgia. He's had a lot of starts for him and has really held up well. Like I said, he can get himself out of position. He can get leaning too far forward on some hits. But he can show up really well in the run game as well. He's got quite a bit of power to his game. So I like a lot of his game. He's not a player that I absolutely love. If they take him at 15, I'd be okay with it. It's not going to be a one that I've talked about players I'd do a backflip for. Andrew Thomas is not one of those players, but I still like his game. He's still a very solid left tackle.
Yeah, I'm getting a lot of pushback just in general with people I talk football with, not just you guys, but the general Broncos community that's not as draft centric, but in general that I speak with, and they're like, "Man, Nick, you are stupid about having Andrew Thomas this low, 13 overall." I think that he's probably a guard or a right tackle in a gap heavy scheme. I think that Georgia scheme did protect him a decent amount. I do like the technique. The 36-inch rumored arm length is nice, but I feel like he's top heavy. I feel like his feet aren't the best. So I like him. I don't love him. and he is my third tackle listed, but I would be 0% shocked if Mekhi Becton passed him. Biggest thing for me, and I just don't think the Broncos have enough goodwill right now to take a pure tackle or one that needs a redshirt year. And that means that offensive lineman they take hopefully projects at tackle, but starts year one at guard. And that's something I can see from Andrew Thomas that I can't see with Becton or a guy like Josh Jones. So I have Thomas higher because of that, but I agree with you. I just don't love the upside. Speaking of upside, gosh darn, incredible upside. He's not going to have surgery before the combine. Hopefully he goes. Laviska Shenault Jr., wide receiver / offensive weapon from Colorado. I thought his 2018 tape was better than 2019, and you're definitely taking a risk taking him because the route running isn't the best. You're going to have a little bit of scheming him open. So see if Pat Shurmur's up to that case. But if he is a guy who's 6'2", 225 and running a 4.3, 4.35 40, even a 4.4 40, that's an absolute freak. So I like Laviska Shenault a lot. Maybe you're not getting the most from him year one, at least in the letting him win those ISO routes. But upside is tremendous. I would have no issue with him at 15. The biggest thing is going to be those combined medical checks. So wait and see on that. So number 12 for you, Carl.
I have Henry Ruggs III here. And I went back and forth of who should be my number 3, who should be my number 4 wide receiver. I do have Ruggs as my number 4. And again, I mean, the guy just has huge upside. If he can figure out a few things to his game, I think he could just absolutely explode on the NFL. It would be... That kind of speed is just so rare. There's a reason that everybody's trying to find the next Tyreek Hill now, not off the field, but on the field of what he brings, because it just completely changes how teams have to play you. And Henry Ruggs offers that kind of upside. He's a little bit raw for being a guy here in the top 15 players, but that upside, he has probably the highest ceiling of any of the wide receivers in this draft.
Alrighty, Eric, number 12 for you.
For me, it's Josh Jones. You guys have talked about him. I don't see him projecting at guard. I mean, unless maybe year 2 or 3, if he's able to add a little bit more sand in his pants, basically. But I just love the upside as a tackle. I think that he can walk away being probably a top 2 tackle out of this class if somebody is able to take the time, develop him, and just teach him all the technical aspects that he just doesn't know. And so I think that with the Broncos, I don't really want a developmental prospect at tackle at 15, but if he's there and depending on how else the board fell, then I can see it and I can be okay with it. Not ideal, but I definitely like him. I like him for the Broncos. And again, it's that developmental prospect for offensive tackle that the Broncos are going to be looking for.
Alrighty, number 11 for you, Eric.
And at number 11, I have Laviska Shenault, and there's been a lot of stuff that I've heard about him, and I've spoken to a guy who's pretty well renowned in the football world with his work that he's done with receivers, and he's basically just not verbatim on this, but his comments were along the lines of his route running isn't a super big deal because he's a guy that you just want to get the ball and let make plays. It's that simple. And for a guy his size, he's pretty fluid, he's pretty smooth, and it's just a matter of just the finer aspects of being a route runner that he needs to get down. And I've also spoken to people in the medical field that are in the know about his medical injuries, and there have been no concerns about that, about long-term issues about him or anything like that. He missed games, and basically what I was told, that he was held out of those games by the medical staff at Colorado's choice, where he could have played, and they just chose not to, just to not make the injuries any worse or anything like that. So still a little bit of a concern there, and the Combine will answer some comments there, but I've heard enough there for me to just be like, all right, it's a big deal, but not a super big deal for me.
Yeah.
Alrighty. Yeah, Carl, you'll get a chance to talk about him in a second. Let's keep it rolling here.
Yep.
Number 11 for you.
Well, you and I have the same guy, AJ Epinesa, and we talked about it on our show that if the Broncos took him at 15, it would be a very good pick for the Broncos. This guy, the heavy hands that he has room to grow. He's just a freak. When you're talking, we got a lot of freaks here in this top 25. This is one of the most freakishly athletic drafts I can remember. And if you get a hold of that and mold him into something more, I just think he would be a great player for the Broncos and somebody you stick between Von Miller, Bradley Chubb, and teams are just going to be in a panic going, what do we do?
Yeah, AJ Epinesa, he's a guy I feel like is slipping right now because most people are seeing him as a 4-3 edge, and everybody wants to see edge rushers that win, like Von Miller, that obvious burst and bend. Sometimes that's great, and sometimes you get Vic Beasley. Getting a Joey Bosa or a DeForest Buckner kind of guy, that's fine as well. And I think that's where Epinesa wins. He's got some of the heaviest hands I've ever seen, and I think his ability to kick in and play 5 technique over to 3 technique, sign me up. I think maybe this is some Iowa bias coming through here, but I like him a lot. I think he can add some weight. He played this past season 282, 280. I think he can play up to 290. He's got the frame for it. So strong, so technical, and just listening to him talk, coaches are going to absolutely love the kid. So AJ Epinesa for 11 for me. Number 10, I'm higher on him than you guys. I definitely do understand there are some concerns as far as the overall game, but I'm a sucker for speed. I need it. Henry Ruggs, the third. He's going to be one of the fastest players in this game. I do think that he is a little bit more multidimensional and has more route running ability than Erick does, but that's fine. And I just want the big play threat. The Broncos have been linked with him, and I wouldn't be surprised. There's some people who are wide receiver freaks that are better than me that have him as their wide receiver 1. I will not go that high, but I have no issue with Henry Ruggs, and I would love him at 15 just because of the spacing he can create and really help Cortland Sutton. Cortland Sutton, after Emmanuel Sanders was traded, teams did everything they could to stop Cortland Sutton, and he still made plays because he's an emerging superstar. That's not hyperbole, but getting a guy like Ruggs across from him, good luck, because you have to account for that speed. It's kind of like, again, Will Fuller. DeAndre Hopkins with Will Fuller, sure, he gets more targets, but the whole offense is less effective. When you get Will Fuller out there, even if he's not getting the ball, just the spacing he creates for everyone else is huge. So I got Ruggs there for me, for my 10th overall player.
All right, guys, you heard it here. Nick has the need for speed.
All right, I'm going to go Laviska Shenault here, and I am the highest on him. I absolutely love his game. And usually I don't go for receivers like this that are a little bit more, what's the word I'm looking for? Unique.
Weapon-y?
Yeah, I usually like
doesn't fit a prototype.
Right, I usually like guys that are a little bit more refined. And he is the opposite of that. But for a piece of clay that you could mold into something great, I think he has, I said this with Henry Ruggs, that he has the highest upside. Laviska Shenault is that guy that I actually see becoming the best wide receiver from this draft if he can stay healthy. Just because he is such a freak, not only as a speed guy, power guy, he's got it all. There's been some players that have come out. You're talking like Derrick Henry at the wide receiver position. A guy that can actually catch, who can run, who can do it all. It's just amazing what this guy does with the ball in his hands. And kind of like Erick said, yeah, year 1, he's not going to be very refined, but it is just you find ways to get the ball in his hand and let him go make the play. And I still think he can be a very productive player even while he's still trying to figure out how to play the wide receiver position. Alrighty,
Erick, your 10th overall player.
And for me, you guys have talked about him. I don't have really much to add, and that's AJ Epinesa. To me, he's classified as an edge, but he's not an edge. He's classified as an interior defensive lineman, but he's not that. To me, he's just a true defensive end. 3-4, 4-3, doesn't matter. You want him at the defensive end spot, either that 7-9 technique, typically a 7 technique with what he brings to the table, or a 5 technique. That's where you want him. He's going to win that way with his hands. I like the technique that he brings. As a 5 technique and a 3-4 front, I would definitely like to see him bulk up a little bit, get up to right around that 290 mark. But I think that he can definitely be effective the way he is now and just be a disruptive force on the interior.
Alrighty, and number 9 for Erick.
At number 9, we get to Jerry Jeudy, the Alabama wide receiver. I like his play. I have been hearing a lot of rumblings about his knee, and I didn't add this too, but there's been rumblings going around about Henry Ruggs' knee too, which is another reason I was a little bit lower on him. But Jerry Jeudy is a great route runner, and I'm curious to see how fast he is overall, because there's been a lot of talk that he's gonna surprise everybody with speed, and I can definitely see it watching his tape. He's definitely. I think that if people want that real Tyreek Hill type guy, I think that Jerry Jeudy is a little bit closer to that than Henry Ruggs, for the simple fact of the route running, of the quickness through his routes. He may not have that same speed, but he has the other elements to it with at least solid speed.
All right, well, I go back to the offensive line here for pick number 9, and I have Jedrick Wills Jr. of Alabama, another Alabama player. Man, This top 10 is kind of littered with Alabama players, of course. Why not? But his ability there at the right tackle spot, he just really rose up boards this year with his play. He's got power. He's got pretty sweet feet. He's got the ability, if you needed him to kick inside for guard year one. He's got that ability. I really like his overall game and what he can bring to the Broncos. And like I said, if his ability to play 4 spots on the offensive line, that's huge versatility year one. And he has that upside to play either that right tackle or left tackle spot. I think he's a really well-rounded player. Nothing in his game really screams this guy's going to bust.
Yeah, I like him a fair amount. Well, I'll be talking about him here in a second. For me, my number 8 player, CeeDee Lamb. He was my number 1. Oh, excuse me. I'm reading it wrong here. I put it on here wrong. And my number 9 player, and it should be CeeDee Lamb, wide receiver from Oklahoma. I like him a lot. He was my wide receiver 1 before the scheme change. I am curious to see how he tests at the NFL Combine, but he's a guy who can win in so many different ways. I just, the very strong hands, good catch radius, good yak ability. Kind of reminds me almost like Alvin Kamara in the open field, his ability to drop his hips and change direction. And he plays just with a nasty demeanor. So I really like CeeDee Lamb. If he falls because he doesn't have a great combine to 15, you just, screw the combine. Trust the tape. He's a good player. So number 9 for me, CeeDee Lamb, my wide receiver 2. Number 8 for me overall, my wide receiver 1, Jerry Jeudy. Can play Z, can play slot. No better receiver getting open quickly in this scheme. He can win with a slot fade. He can win on slants. And a guy that, again, you have to account for not the speed player that Henry Ruggs is, not the physical player that CeeDee Lamb is, but I think the perfect antithesis to Courtland Sutton. I don't see him getting past the Raiders at 12, but I would absolutely love him in this scheme, especially with more 11 personnel going on. Gimme. I would be head over heels to get him.
We need John Gruden to do what he did last year and just take that surprise player that everybody's like, what are you doing? And it not be Jerry Jeudy. But no, I mean, it is blasphemous not to have CeeDee Lamb as your number 1 wide receiver. I'll just say that. I do have my number 2 wide receiver, Jerry Jeudy. You're right. Just the fluidity of his game is just something to behold. He does have some concerns with his hands, kind of like Jalen Reagor. That just some concentration drops. He didn't have a whole lot of plays where he was having to make contested catches just because he gets himself open so easily. But so you do have some concerns with some of that. But just for the fit of the offense with what the Broncos are going to be doing this next year, there probably isn't a receiver that's a better fit than Jerry Jeudy. But I still have another wide receiver that because of his overall game, I just love it. I can't not have him as my number 1 guy. All right, Eric, you had 8 here.
For me, at number 8 is Javon Kinlaw, and I'm actually shocked that I'm the lowest of him of the 3 of us, because this is a guy that I'm actually pounding the table for the Broncos to take at 15. I love his game. I love the upside he has. He reminds me of a more raw version of Chris Jones when he came out of the draft. I've spoken about him a lot on my podcast, Dub Valley Deep Divers. I've spoken about him a lot in multiple articles, multiple videos I've done. Just a lot of stuff. A lot of time has been spent of me just talking about him. I absolutely love him. Just putting him in between Von Miller and Bradley Chubb is going to scare the living crap out of offensive linemen and quarterbacks, especially if he can sit there and be taught what to do after he wins the rep. Like, if once he has that, he has a chance to be a top 10 defensive lineman in the NFL, and which may not seem like a lot, but there are a lot of good defensive linemen in the NFL. And for number 7, it's that Alabama right tackle that Carl's already talked about, and Jedrick Wills, or was it Nick? One of you two have already talked about him, but it's Jedrick Wills, and I like the power he brings. I like his feet. I think he offers pretty good mobility, and I think that he may be not necessarily the safest tackle, but I think he's a little bit safer of a tackle prospect than a lot of other people do. And again, I just like his game overall. There are some issues that I want to see him work with basically on a technical aspect, his hand placement with his punching, stuff like that. But he's a tackle that I can see going. I can actually see him being the first tackle taken off the board just because of the upside that he does have.
Yeah, I could see it. The passing sets are so clean.
Yeah. And
I think he could play guard as well. So I really like him a lot. He's the offensive tackle I'm most certain will not be there for the Broncos at 15.
All right. Well, my guy here, and it's funny, usually my type of wide receiver, if anybody's listened to us for a while here, is Jerry Jeudy. But I have absolutely fallen in love with CeeDee Lamb. And I remember him his freshman year at Oklahoma going, that guy's going to be something. He was making ridiculous catches back then. And again, this year, making ridiculous catches. I think was it the Big 12 championship? He didn't have as good a game, or was it against LSU?
It was against LSU.
Yeah, he didn't have a great game. He had a couple drops, things like that. But that game was already out of hand. There was no
also
way.
His quarterback.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Well, yeah. What? He should be the number 1 overall pick. No, CeeDee Lamb, I love his game. He's got it all. I mean, you're right. He's probably not going to test great at the combine. And I hope teams get freaked out by that and let him fall to 15. And if they do, the Broncos would be stupid to pass on a player like him, just because he is a guy that can come in year one, be a high productive player. The Broncos can do whatever they want. I know some people question whether he's too much like Courtland Sutton. There's nothing wrong with having 2 number 1 wide receivers. I'm sorry. And he offers a little bit more, I think, in just athleticism. I don't know. I do. I love his game so much. When I'm having a bad day, I go watch CeeDee Lamb.
Yeah, he's a lot of fun. So number 7 for me, Javon Kinlaw. I have spoken with a friend of mine, Dalton Miller, who works for Blue Chip Scouting and covers the Cowboys and some draft stuff down there in Dallas, but heard some concerns about the knee. So we'll look out for that there. It's something that, it's going to be big with the combine, but Javon Kinlaw's got probably as high of a ceiling as any defensive player in this class, not named Chase Young, some Chris Jones to his game, maybe even some, John Henderson, if that name rings a bell to any of you old heads listening to the podcast right now. But I like Kinlaw a good amount. I kind of struggled. I had him here. I had him below CeeDee Lamb and Jerry Jeudy. But again, getting a guy that can rush the passer from the interior with his 3-down ability from playing 5 technique all the way down to 0 in sub packages, in my opinion. Not the best for a 6'7" guy, but it's a passing set there. So I like him a lot. The knee will be huge, but I think he's got massive upside, and I would have no issue taking him. And again, maybe in a normal draft, CeeDee Lamb, Jerry Jeudy might be higher, but I can find a good wide receiver day too. I'm not finding anything close to Javon Kinlaw on the interior defensive line, so Kinlaw gets the boost there for me. 7 overall. 6 overall for me, I have Jedrick Wills, probably one of the cleaner offensive tackle prospects. I'm not sure he is the best athlete, but I think his feet, his passing blocks on the right side are just super clean. I believe he would have played the left side if Tua was not a left-handed quarterback, and so powerful at the point of attack too. I think he's still kind of unlocking some of that power, and I think he could play guard year 1 and play right tackle or left tackle beyond. So I like him a lot. He's my number 6 overall player, and I would have no issue with him. He's my highest rated Alabama player. So 6 for you, Carl?
I have Javon Kinlaw. And part of, I think, the reason that I have him higher than both of you is just a little bit of because the wide receiver depth is so deep and because the defensive line, after about the first 6 or 7 guys, it does fall off quite a bit. I mean, there's still talent there, but really if you're talking after the top 3 guys here that we have, Epinesa, Kinlaw, and we're going to, of course, talk about Derek Brown, there is a pretty big drop-off in my opinion. And so I raise him up just because of that and just that need that the Broncos have there at the defensive line spot. But I love his game. He still has a lot to work on. I don't know about his year 1 impact of how great it's going to be. He's still going to be able to push the pocket. I mean, that's going to be a nice piece for the Broncos to have. Just it might be year 2, 3 before we see his ability to actually finish off plays.
Yep. And number 6 for you, Eric?
For number 6 for me is CeeDee Lamb. I mean, you guys have talked about him extensively. I just love his play. He's able to win anywhere on the field, short, intermediate, deep routes. I think that his speed is not the best, but I think it's good enough for the NFL. I think that he's just very quick. He's one of those guys that, and we see it a lot. There's a lot of NFL receivers that they don't run the fastest 40, but they're just so dang quick that defensive backs just have a hard time sticking with them. And that's what I see when I see CeeDee Lamb. I would absolutely love him in Denver as the number 2 to Courtland Sutton, and just then go get a speed guy later on to really take it in, because those guys will handle everything else that you need to with Sutton and Lamb. And he just opens up the offense a lot, I think. And again, big fan of the player.
Alrighty, well, we have to take one more quick break. We actually all have the same top 5, but in different order, so not to be a spoiler there, don't go anywhere, though, because we got to discuss these guys. We'll be right back.
This is the Overtime Podcast Network.
Alrighty, and we are back on the Building the Broncos podcast. Again, we are discussing our top 25 big board for the Denver Broncos specifically. No quarterbacks on these boards because, Drew Lock is probably going to get the 2020 season. And we're tired of talking quarterbacks every single year for half these draft podcasts. So going to kind of give us a little bit of break here. We have our top 5 left, and we actually, the group think, although I think maybe these guys might be the top 5 players in this class just in general. But Eric, we'll kick it off to you here. Actually, guys, we all have the same number 5 overall player, and he is – I'm going to take the floor here because this has been my guy since 3 years ago when I first saw him as a true freshman at Iowa. Tristan Wirfs, right tackle at Iowa. 6'5", 320 pounds, an absolute freak. He's going to be the talk of the NFL Combine coming out, I think. I think he's going to absolutely just jump out of the gym and run extremely well, and he's going to bench press as well as anybody. Bench press is actually not something that they focus on at Iowa as far as a metric drill for the power with Chris Doyle, their strength and conditioning coach, but still, he's going to do great. Tristan Wirfs, a guy who can probably play any scheme very well and can play guard extremely well also. Arm measurement is going to be key for him. He needs to hit that 34-inch arm length to make sure he can really solidify himself at tackle, but I think he's got a ceiling. The only guy who can compare to him as ceiling-wise is Mekhi Becton, and Wirfs' technique isn't always the best, but I think that it's an area that he can improve upon, and just the natural tools are incredible. I probably wouldn't be able to sit down for a few weeks with my pants fitting correctly if they took Tristan Wirfs.
Just make sure he doesn't get a moped.
Oh, yeah. He can get a car after that.
Yeah, there you go. He could probably afford one at that point. All right, well, let's go to number 4 since we all have Tristan Wirfs here at 5. And unless, Eric, do you have anything else to add on Tristan Wirfs?
Not really,
okay.
Except that Denver has enough Iowa guys.
It's funny, you were higher on Epinesa, the Iowa boy, than either Nick or I. But, all right, we'll go to number 4 here. And you guys have the same guy. And Derek Brown, I'm a little higher on him than you guys. But what do you like about Derek Brown, Eric?
I just like he's can do it all. He's a do-it-all defensive lineman. He's a guy that's going to be able to clog some lanes against the run. Very athletic. Guy never gives up. His motor is constantly running. I can't remember what team it was against, but I think it was LSU. But he just plowed through a triple team and just caused a play. Then same game, I'm pretty sure it was the same game anyways, he sits there and they dumped it off to the running back or a receiver screen or something like that, and he chases the play down. Like, this guy, his motor's non-stopping. He's the guy that you want on your interior defensive line, and you're going to be happy with it because he's just going to do so much to not just help your defense as whole, but especially those edge rushers and the defensive linemen next to him in particular. And that's, to me, you win up front first. I know there's a lot of I don't want to say speculation, but a lot of people out there that have their analytics and stuff to back up that you win in the secondary first. But for me, it's you win up front first, you win the trenches, you win the game, and he's going to help you win the trenches.
Yeah, I like Derek Brown a lot. He's a versatile guy. I think he can play 5 technique all the way down to 0 technique. I don't know if he has the same upside of Javon Kinlaw, but probably has as high of a floor as anybody in this class. Also sounds like an amazing dude as well. Came back for a senior year, really just dominated the entire year. Was second for I cannot remember what the defensive line award is behind our number 1 overall player. You can probably guess who it is going to be. But I like Derek Brown a lot. I have him at 4 just because I feel like I love interior defensive line. It's probably my favorite position to scout, but it seems like there's starting to be a trend where interior defensive line every single offseason is more available in free agency than one would think. Now, obviously, you have your Aaron Donalds of the world. Those guys are the cream of the crop, the 1% of the 1%. But, I mean, you got Gerald McCoy and Adama Sue. You got potentially Akeem Hicks this year, maybe Chris Jones, Calais Campbell, blah, 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 blah. It just feels like that interior defensive line maybe is a little bit easier to get year to year than it has been in a while. And maybe I'm off with that, but that just kind of makes me lower Derek Brown. It was enough of a differentiator for me compared to these next 3 guys. But still, number 4 overall. I love him. He's one of my favorites in the class.
Well, I'm going to be the different guy here, and I have Isaiah Simmons. And I love his game. I really do. I do worry a little bit sometimes, those versatile guys, because they don't have that set position, that they just have trouble figuring out how to use them completely. I don't really worry too much about Fangio figuring out how to use them. and like I said, I have him in my top 4, so I'm getting a little bit.
Oh, I don't like him.
I'm getting a little bit nitpicky on here, a little bit of just there is some concern because the NFL they like versatile players, but there's also some concern about, well, if you move this player to this position, well, that means everybody else has to move kind of different positions, and you have to kind of figure out how to get the entire defense on the same page with that one player. And I mean, plenty of teams have made that work. I mean, we can look at our own division and see what the Chargers have done with their very versatile player. And so Isaiah Simmons, I love his game. I really do. I just sometimes worry about how he's going to do because he's not a true linebacker. I mean, you're not going to plug him in there at inside linebacker and say, hey, get off the block, go make a play in the run game. That's not his game. So there's just a little bit of that. But again, you plug him in this defense, he is that unicorn player that you can do so much with.
And I will jump in here because you're talking about him. He's my number 3 player, just ahead of Derek Brown. And honestly, my 2, 3, and 4, you might be able to flip them around. I think there's an elite tier. Those guys, the top 4 players I have as blue chippers in this class, and all of them defensive players. Isaiah Simmons, I wasn't as high on him coming into the playoffs, but then I really just focused on him in the Ohio State game and the LSU game. And my God, what a unique player. I can't think of if I've seen anybody like him. And I didn't like him when I thought about him as a linebacker, but once I thought about him as like kind of a hybrid defensive back, a Derwin James type, oh man, my heart started beating really fast. He played 116 snaps this season at outside linebacker, 299 in inside linebacker, but it was kind of more of a 3-3-5 kind of 4-2-6 defense from there. He played 262 at slot cornerback, 132 at free safety, and 100 at strong safety. I really think his best fit in this defense would be kind of that overhang safety / nickelback that we saw with Will Parks down the stretch of the season. I think it was the last 5 games Will Parks played 80% of the snaps, and with Simmons' ability to play zone, man, blitz, he can even drop into deep zone, play in the flat. Talk about a unique player. And I also think he is, with so much issues with the RPO, especially with the Chiefs, there's probably not a player that's more of an RPO neutralizer than Isaiah Simmons, 6'4", 220 pounds. So starting off, I definitely have him in that kind of that nickelback role where the Broncos are playing a 4-2-5, that nickel defense. But really it's base because he is that good of a tackler in space as well. You're playing a light 4-3. So he can play that kind of will linebacker role, and you're still in sub. It's an incredible player. I love him a lot. He's probably one of the most unique players I've scouted coming out of coming out of college football, and I have him at number 3.
All right. Well, Eric and I have the same guy here at 3, Jeffrey Okudah of Ohio State, and just probably one of the cleanest cornerback prospects in a while, I would say. He's got length. He's got plenty of weight. He's got plenty of athleticism. He's smart. He's not afraid to stick his head in there in the run game. I do question a little bit. Sometimes in zone coverage, he had his struggles just a little bit. But beyond that, I mean, he just checks off everything that you're looking for in a true number 1 cornerback. He's one of those guys that I think could step into the NFL and be considered in that top 5 cornerbacks day one, depending on what team he goes to and what kind of situation he lands in. But just a great player to watch. I mean, you fall in love watching him. I mean, really all those cornerbacks for Ohio State you fall in love with. But especially him, like I said, he just clicks, or he just checks off everything you're looking for in a top cornerback.
Yeah, I agree. And the only reason why I don't have him as my number 2 player is that I'm just not a big fan of him in zone. I think he's much better in man. I do think he can work in zone, but there's definitely a lot more issues there. Other than that, there's nothing really to nitpick about his game. I mean, he's just very clean, such a clean prospect, and as you said, he could definitely be a top 5 cornerback, depending on where he goes in the NFL from day one. And my number 2 guy is a guy that you both have already talked about, just to get him out there. It's Isaiah Simmons, and it's basically the versatility that he brings, being able to do so many things. Nick, you mentioned everywhere he took snaps and the amount of snaps he had, and I just love that versatility. And in this defense, you hit the nail on the head with that as well, about being able to play that, basically that will linebacker spot and still be in a sub package, basically, because of his versatility. And then also, as you said, Nick, with the Chiefs and their RPOs, I don't think there's anybody better in this class to defend against it. And that right there, because you got to figure out a way to stop the Chiefs, as well as score as many points as the Chiefs. But stopping them, I don't think that there is anybody better in this class to stop that RPO offense than Isaiah Simmons.
And Carl, who do you have for 2?
I have Derek Brown, and I absolutely love his game. I mean, I don't. The last time I remember an interior defensive lineman destroying teams as much as him was Ndamukong Suh. I remember watching, because I used to date a girl that was a big Nebraska fan, and now I'm married to a girl that's from Nebraska that hates Nebraska. But no, just, I mean, there were those times, like Eric said, he could be in a triple team and still win. That kind of strength and athleticism and just that no quit. Because a lot of guys, you see a triple team, you're like, well, I'll just let somebody else go win. No, he's still thinking, I'm going to go out here and win this play. And he is great in the run game, great in the pass game. He had one play where he was running on the field late, and it was a screen pass, and he went and made a play out in space at 330 pounds. And so that kind of guy just plugged into the middle of this defense. I think that is just game-changing for how this defense goes. And there's no way he's going to fall to the Broncos, but he is one of the few players that I'm thinking if the Broncos ever were to actually trade up, he would be pretty close to the top of my list. Obviously, he's number 2 on my list of guys that I'm willing to trade up for.
And number 2 for me, Jeffrey Okudah. And, length, ball skills, tenacity. I think he does have good zone ability as well. He's a man guy right now, but that's because if you can play man at like a program like Ohio State, you should play man because it's so much harder to beat man coverage. Those guys are more rare, but I think he does have that ability. And Pete Schrager today of Good Morning America or Good Morning Football, whatever the heck it is on NFL Network, said that Okudah is so good. People are talking about him as being the best cornerback prospect of the last decade. That's better than Marshawn Lattimore. That's better than Denzel Ward. That's better than Jalen Ramsey. So I like Okudah a lot. I think he's got tremendous upside. I mean, there's a reason Elway and the whole staff flew out to Columbus to watch him. So I do think Eric actually had to leave. So we'll talk about his number 1 guy here, a guy that the Broncos have no chance at. Thanks, Eric, for coming on as well. That means the banging will stop in the background to you listeners if you're still with us. Chase Young, number 1 for us across the board. I don't know if he's a Myles Garrett level player, but man, he's up there, more productive than Myles Garrett. Maybe not the same freakish explosiveness in the lower body, but what an incredible player. Broncos got no chance at him though, so just enjoy him and hope he doesn't go to an AFC West team.
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah.
Please don't make it
before
to the
you get out of here. Before we get out of here, I do want to ask you, Jeffrey Simmons or Derek Brown? Because I would take Jeffrey Simmons in a vacuum.
I would take Derek Brown.
Okay. I think Simmons had a little bit more power and length.
Okay. Well, agree to disagree, I guess. No, I do. Like I said, I don't think there's a defensive lineman that I've liked more than Derek Brown in a long time. And that's saying something considering the guys, like you said, a Jeffrey Simmons, that those kind of players. I mean, last year's, I loved obviously Ed Oliver quite a bit. The Alabama guy, all of a sudden spacing his
Quinnen Williams.
Yeah, Quinnen Williams. There you go. Loved all those guys. I mean, absolutely loved him. Would have loved to see him on the Broncos. But Derek Brown, I think I would have even above all of those guys.
Alrighty, well, that's going to wrap up our top 25 big boards. I'll read up Eric's down since he's not here. 25, Austin Jackson. 24, Grant Delpit. 23, A.J. Terrell. 22, Jeff Gladney. 21, Isaiah Wilson. 20, Kenneth Murray. 19, Brandon Ayuk. 18, Andrew Thomas. 17, Trevon Diggs. 16, Kalavion Chasen. 15, Henry Ruggs. 14, Xavier McKinney. 13, Jalen Reagor. 12, Josh Jones. 11, Laviska Shenault. 10, A.J. Epinesa. 9, Jerry Jeudy. 8, Javon Kinlaw. 7, Jedrick Wills. 6, CeeDee Lamb. 5, Tristan Wirfs. 4, Derek Brown. 3, Jeffrey Okudah. 2, Isaiah Simmons. And 1, Chase Young. Do you want to give yours off, Carl?
Yeah. So 25, I have DeAndre Swift. 24, C.J. Henderson. 23, Justin Jefferson. 22, Patrick Queen. 21, Mekhi Becton. 20, Christian Fulton. 19, Brandon Ayuk. 18, Trevon Diggs. 17, Jeff Gladney. 16, Xavier McKinney. 15, Jalen Reagor. 14, Josh Jones. 13, Andrew Thomas. 12, Henry Ruggs. 11, A.J. Epinesa. And in my top 10, I have Laviska Shenault. Number 9, Jedrick Wills Jr. Number 8, Jerry Jeudy. Number 7, CeeDee Lamb. Number 6, Javon Kinlaw. And getting into the top 5, Tristan Wirfs. Number 4, Isaiah Simmons. Number 3, Jeffrey Okudah. Number 2, Derek Brown. And number 1, Chase Young.
And my list, 25-1, 25 Patrick Queen, 24 DeAndre Swift, 23 Justin Jefferson, 22 Brandon Ayuk, 21 Grant Delpit, 20 Trevon Diggs, 19 Jeff Gladney, 18 Josh Jones, 17 Christian Fulton, 16 Jalen Reagor, 15 Mekhi Becton, 14 Xavier McKinney, 13 Andrew Thomas, 12 Laviska Shenault, 11 AJ Epinesa, 10 Henry Ruggs, 9 CeeDee Lamb, 8 Jerry Jeudy, 7 Javon Kinlaw, 6 Jedrick Wills, 5 Tristan Wirfs, 4 Derek Brown, 3 Isaiah Simmons, 2 Jeffrey Okudah, and 1 Chase Young. But that's going to wrap up today's episode of Building the Broncos. Longer, but man, top 25 big board, Carl. This really is the season. It's like negative 20 wind chill outside or something, but I feel it in my bones. Draft season. Talking big boards, I mean, it does not get better than this. This is what we prepped the entire year for. Really, it's true. For real.
Well, yeah, I mean, this is lots and lots of hours of work put into just coming up with this list. And I mean,
incredible amount of work.
Right. I mean, we've expanded obviously beyond our top 25, but yeah.
Can you imagine how long the podcast would be?
Oh my gosh. Yeah. We might rival our longest podcast that we had to break up into like 3 episodes.
Yeah, but that's going to wrap up today's episode. You can find Carl on Twitter at Carl Dumler MHH. You can find Eric at Erick Trickel, and you can find myself at Nick Kendell MHH. Make sure you head on over to milehighhuddle.com, an affiliate of the Maven Coalition and Sports Illustrated. You can follow the Building the Broncos podcast and all our other great audio content by subscribing to the Huddle Up podcast wherever you listen to your shows. You can follow us on Twitter at Mile High Huddle and at BTB Football Pod. For Carl, I'm Nick, wrapping up another episode of the Building the Broncos podcast. We hope you guys enjoyed it, and we'll see you soon. Go Broncos.
You've been listening to Building the Broncos. Join Broncos Country's deep divers at milehighhuddle.com to keep the conversation going.